Hello out there! Welcome yet again to another live stream here at AutoCrit. Today is the day. It is time to submit your challenge, submit your entry, for the challenge for the mystery writing challenge. And we do have a special guest, Renee Pawlish, who will be on in just a moment, but stay tuned for that interview. In the meantime, though, wrapping up this challenge we have here. We told all of you to write a mystery. Yes, there are some prizes in stake. We will be giving away those prizes on Friday, which will be our final stream. But yes, it's going to be quick as well. The deadline is actually tomorrow evening because it's Thursday, so it's 11:59 tomorrow evening. So you do need to be quick about your submission. So if you did not, in fact, finish on time, if you're a good procrastinator, well, you're going to have to hustle. That's just how it is. So ultimately, what we asked you to do is to create a cast of suspects that could be guilty of an interesting crime. Probably most of you chose murder because murder is the most popular in the mystery genre for loads of reasons. But if you did it, that's fine. You're still eligible. It could be whatever kind of mystery you want. You also needed to write a crime. So go ahead. So you went ahead and you hopefully wrote that out in the writing desk. And we're going to show you now how we are going to submit. You need to submit by July 26th. Okay, so how are you going to submit? So imagine this is your file. Look at that. Isn't that lovely? So you would have your crime, you would have your list of suspects all in here like that, sure. So you would go up here to where it says save, hit save, go to submissions. Let me back up a little bit. And then mystery challenge, you hit it. If you hit it, it'll submit. It won't be like it'll go. So don't submit until you are absolutely ready. You can see there you have 1 day, 10 hours, 55 minutes, and so on seconds. Okay? So do not delay. Submit today. That is great. Is the beat sheet ignored? Yes. If you use the inspiration beat sheet, we are not looking at that in terms of eligibility for the challenge. So if that's going to make your word count super high, no, it does not count. And somebody was asking about that. So what if you wrote this and you wanted to use it to inspire you? Well, what I would suggest is you would cut out your crime here and you would go into the inspiration studio, go into the story builder, new story builder idea, and then you're going to want to scroll down, and then you're going to want to change the beat sheet to a mystery one, and then you're going to want to go to mystery revealed, and you're going to pop that in there because that's where the mystery gets revealed, right? Kind of obvious. And then for your cast of suspects, you get to decide what kind of role they play in the story. If you want to use this as your beat sheet, right? So you have who would be your relationship character, like who's going to help the main character figure out how to solve the crime, who's going to be more of the emotional side, the reason side, support side. Depends on whether or not you use these archetypes or not. But if you want to, you would cut and paste each one of the cast of suspects, and then you could go ahead and you could use this as your beat sheet, and you could even use it to help you brainstorm some ideas if you want, and it'll give you some suggestions. So if that's what you want to do, go ahead and do that as well, but it is not necessary for this challenge. All we're looking for the challenge is just this material right here in your writing desk. All right, any questions here? Will the suspects be any of those archetypes? They could, right? You have all of the suspects, but you have no idea who the protagonist is. Usually in a mystery, the protagonist is whoever is solving the case, but not always. The story builder helped you come up with names, and you hate trying to do that. Yes, it is a fun little name generator. And actually, that might be a question I can ask my guest in terms of how they come up with names. I'd be very curious. All right, so any other questions about the challenge before I bring on our special guest? Let me know. There is no minimum, although I imagine it would have to be at least like 30 or so. Probably more than that, but no, there is no minimum. Don't worry about that. Keep in mind, it will be read live on Friday, so you want to have enough detail to get the audience involved. All right, so let me bring on my guest here. Hello there.
Hey there. How are you?
Hi. So I have Renee Pawlish here, mystery author. You might want to give a little bit of an introduction on yourself in terms of the types of works you write, because I know you write a couple little genres, right? It's not just a specific genre of mystery. So if you want to give a little introduction before we get started, and we can talk a little bit about mystery writing. I'm excited.
Okay. I'm Renee Pawlish. I've been writing, since I was in high school, but first self-published a book in 2006, and then in 2011 jumped on the ebook bandwagon and published my first mystery, which was This Doesn't Happen in the Movies. And I've gone on from there and had a spin-off series with the Dewey Webb series. I've written a few kids' books and that kind of thing. And then my latest is the Joe Gunning thriller series. So I've kind of kept, for the most part, in the mystery thriller genre as I've, 12 years now of doing this.
And how did you actually get started writing in the first place? Like, what kind of drew you to the craft, as they say?
Yeah, I think I've always enjoyed writing. And when I was a kid, we had a neighbor who encouraged me to do some writing. And I had something that was very like Hardy Boy-ish that she critiqued and looked at. And then I took creative writing classes in high school and just kind of kept at it on my own. I've always loved reading and definitely reading mysteries. And I got out of grad school and had an idea in my head, and a friend of mine kept pretending like she was at a typewriter typing and encouraged me to write it. And so I just went from there, kind of always had in the back of my mind, gosh, could I make this a career, that kind of thing. And so just kept at it.
Yeah. So you always were interested in that genre, right? It wasn't like
Yes.
You kind of experimented around. Have you ever tried to dabble in anything else, or you're pretty gung-ho on the mystery thriller and that's your wheelhouse? And
That is my wheelhouse. But I did, after I wrote a couple of the Reed Ferguson stories, I actually had a dream I was in the middle of reading a Stephen King novel and had a dream, and that led to the writing of Nephilim, which is supernatural mystery, kind of horror elements, although not gory. And then I have written some kids' book stuff that was historical fiction. But yeah, mystery is what I know and what I like. And I respond well to the idea of you have to have a conclusion. You need to figure out who done it. And I really like that as a reader, and I really like that as an author.
Awesome. So yes, here's a question. Are you self-published, or do you have an agent and a publisher? What was the route you took for getting your work out there to the audience?
Right. Well, a long time ago, I'm dating myself, but I did try to get an agent and actually came very close a couple of times. Some back and forth with agents, but I never did pick up one. And then as the self-publishing kind of grew, that's what I did in 2011. I hired my own editor locally here in town and worked with her and, cleaned up that first mystery. And so I've been self-published ever since. And, quite frankly, now I don't see the reason to get an agent, because I'm doing better, I think, than an agent and a New York publisher could do for me. So I'll stick with this unless somebody gives me a really good deal.
Yeah. Any of you out there? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
Like the buyout price is. No, but the thing is that it's true. Like, I feel like there's a little bit of a stigma, and it is a bit old fashioned, because that just was the way you had to do it, right? And now there's so many working authors that do self-publish, right? Now, how did you kind of manage that? Because I know there was a process, right? There was a process in which you were writing and then doing other jobs, and then eventually you were able to transition to basically you pretty much write as your main career now. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. It took me 10 years and a lot of books to do it. But so I've spent a lot of nights and weekends giving up a lot of other things in order to pursue the writing. And the other thing is the advertising, because I think people have this idea that I'm just going to write a book and people are magically going to find it. And that's just, that might have been the case in 2008, 9, 10, or whatever, when this whole thing was with Amazon and ebooks was starting out. But it's definitely not the case now. And I took some online classes and stuff on like Facebook ads and Amazon ads, and I did some of that, had some success, but truthfully, I hate doing it. It's not my forte. And through a series of taking some classes and whatnot, I was introduced to a lady who's managing my ads now, and she does a great job for me. And that piece of the discoverability has really helped. And the other thing that really helped me was that when I started the Sarah Spillman police procedural series, that hit a different market of the female protagonist, very popular. And then I got a BookBub. I'm assuming you're familiar with BookBub.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And so that helped that particular series take off. And at that point I kind of went, okay, I think I can see this is getting to a point where I can quit my day job. And then a year ago I decided to do that, and it's only been great because it finally allowed me the time to start the Joe Gunning series, which I've had in my head for like about 8 years, and I didn't have time to sit down and execute it. So yeah, it was a long process to get here.
Oh, sure. And like how many, like you said you had to write a lot, like what was the pace of release you feel like that was necessary to get you to that point? I just kind of want to give audience, obviously everyone's got a different path, but kind of gives audiences an idea of what kind of goes behind the scenes on this sort of thing.
Right. Early on, actually, I didn't publish a ton. Maybe, it was like a book, and then I think another 6 to 8 months, the next book, that kind of thing. But then I realized if I was going to make this go, especially in this genre, I think people like series, and they won't necessarily, at least what I've always heard is they won't try your books until they see you've got 3 or 4 and they've got characters that they can attach to. And so I knew I needed to start getting books out faster. And eventually I was on a pace of doing a novel about every other month. And then for a while, the mantra was, well, get short stories out there because that'll keep people interested while you're writing your novel. So I was writing a short story every month. I've stopped that, but I've been on a pace of about a book every other month for quite a while. And I'm finally, this summer was kind of like, I need to slow it down. And I haven't totally succeeded in that, but I'm trying.
Yeah. And these works are in what kind of like length you're talking about?
So most of the Reed and Deweys are probably between about 55 to 60,000 words. So a little on the shorter side. The Sarah Spillman and the Joe Gunning are more like about 75,000 words or so.
Mm-hmm. We have a lot of impressed comments. Wow. Holy crap. Look, ever met your machine. So people are very impressed with the productivity, but that actually is a good point, right? You obviously aren't just a machine. So what sort of, have you always found it easy to be that productive, or have you, really had to hone in on it? And what have you kind of done in order to try to keep that momentum going?
Right. Yeah. Well, the funny thing is I don't feel like a machine. I know people that they're doing like 8,000 words a day. And I'm like, my brain can't do that. I need a break.
right?
What I have found, and I laugh because people will go, you're very driven, and I'll go, really? But as I looked back on my life, it's like, yes, I am very driven, and this is the desire to go, I want to quit the day job was strong enough that I also knew, I've heard from authors that I talked to a long time ago, they'd say, everybody goes, oh, I'm going to write a book. Very few people actually have the discipline to put their butt in a chair and sit down and do it. And you're not going to produce anything if you're not out there typing the words and that kind of thing. And so what I would do, and even now, but especially when I had a job, is I would kind of look at things and go, okay, over the next couple months, I know I have XYZ going on and whatever, but I think it's very, I write very instinctually, but I know my pacing now after having done it for a while. And so I can go, okay, my books, the Reed Ferguson and Dewey Webb's tend to be 30 chapters. And so I go, I kind of know how the story has to go, and then I would go 30 chapters. Okay, that's 30 days. Let's build in a week or two for life's going to happen and that kind of thing. But I would try to keep to that goal. And if one day I was like, well, I hadn't planned on my friend calling to let's do this, so I try to make it up the next day or over the weekend or that kind of thing. So that I stay on a pace and hit that goal. And that speaks to my driven personality because, because there are people that would go, okay, I missed a day, whatever, it's fine. But for me, it was very important to keep the productivity, to keep going and keep producing. Because the other thing is it logically makes sense. The more you have out there, the more potential revenue you can make. So, it's a numbers game.
Absolutely. No, it's true, right? And speaking of numbers game, like, do you go into a day and it's like, I know a lot of authors are like, I will write this many words a day. Is that kind of your strategy, or is it not quite as regimented as that?
No, I don't do a word count. I do a chapter count. And basically it'll be, I need to do a chapter a day, that type of thing. And so that way I don't stop. Because I've known people, and I know myself, if you go, well, I'm just going to do 1,000 words, you might be in the middle of a scene, but you've told yourself I'm only going to do 1,000 words, and it makes it easier to stop. And then you got to get back in the flow the next time you pick it up. So for me, logically, it's like, let's just do the chapter. And some days the chapter might be longer, other times it's shorter, but it's always a chapter. Or I got into a bind last year where I had a pre-order up, and I don't know if anybody has done those with Amazon, but they're really, and they're really sticky about changing the date. Yeah. And I was like, so I was like, well, I don't want to do this. So I got into a bind where I needed to do a Sarah novel fast. And
right. It's always fun when you promise people a product you don't have, and you're like, I know I'm going to deliver it, and then it's like, can I deliver?
No, I wrote that book in 3 weeks. It's the fastest I've ever written a novel, and I don't want to do it again.
It's funny because, again, like, you have these conversations and people are like, yeah, but in the traditional publishing world, this sort of stuff happens everywhere, guys. Like, don't think, like, you could be like, oh, you have to write, writing quickly is poor. It's really not. Think of all of these professional writers. Some of the advice I've gotten about writing quickly came from the writers of South Park. And they're like, we have to crank out dozens of episodes every season, and we had to come up with processes on like, okay, how do we make a plot that functions? So if you're a working artist, this is just part of the thing. It's part of the thing. It doesn't matter where you are. But it can help, because I think sometimes again, you can feel like, well, I don't know, is it going to be good enough, or things like that. It's like, you got it out there. You just keep moving. Having that momentum helps.
Yeah. And that's why you have edits and rewrites and editors and all of that, right? Yeah. But the story will never get out there if you don't start typing it up and putting it on the page.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to the editing process, obviously you're writing an awful lot, and some of the people are trying to figure out, it's like, okay, so how were you spending a lot of money on editing early on to get it to a certain quality, or were you kind of doing the best you can and then putting it out there and then making tweaks? Like what was your process as you were getting started, and how much has it changed now in
Right. I think early on, the first 3 books I wrote, or the first 2 books, which are not published.
Usually that's how it works.
Yeah. I actually worked with a family friend who was she was a English teacher and that kind of thing. And I got a lot of really good help from her on just, she was going through the story chapter by chapter and going, this is what I'm seeing, or I'm waiting for this. And it was very intuitive between us, but it helped me see what was going on, or see what a reader would expect. And then when I wrote This Doesn't Happen in the Movies, that was where I started getting agents going, there's something here. I think it might need a little work and I don't have time or something. So I went back to my friend and she helped me again work through all of it, and clean it up. But I knew for myself, there were a lot of people that were just putting stuff out there. And I think the market was bearing maybe some mediocre stuff along with some really good stuff. But I was like, if I'm going to do this, I want it to be good. And so I did hire an editor here in town. And she hadn't done mysteries. She'd done other stuff. And it was kind of funny because we look back on it and go, I think we trained each other a little bit. But it was great to have somebody that was here in town that I could meet with personally, that we could talk through things. And so there was a really good learning process with her as well, but also a lot of reading and stuff too. I've never, other than some classes in high school, I've never actually taken coursework on anything, but the internet was and is a great resource to look at a lot of things in terms of helping you clean up and edit what you're doing.
Sure. And here's kind of following along. Do you edit as you write, or write and edit when you're done? Like, how clean? I mean, this is really, it's a process thing. It's going to have to be edited sometime anyway. But do you feel like you write pretty cleanly as you go at that rate, or you're kind of pumping it out there and you have to go back in and really kind of muscle through it to to get it published ready?
Right. Well, my process has changed a little bit. Earlier on, I would type up a chapter, and then the next time I wrote, I would read that chapter and give it an edit, and that would get me back into the story, and then write the next chapter. And then when I finished, do a full edit. And I used to print it out and read through that copy. And as my process has changed, and honestly, as I've had to speed up, one of the things that really helped me was starting to dictate. So now I dictate a chapter into my phone, and then I have software that will transcribe it. And so then I will go back through and edit that. I add in things like, sometimes I use the word blah, because it's a word that you're generally not going to use in conversation or anything. Right. But if I know that I need to put in some description or look something up or whatever, I'll just kind of go and then blah describe or something, so that then when I go back through, then we'll edit it and look those things up and that kind of thing. But I do a pass through with that. And then when I finished with the whole story, then I will do another final edit. And I'm not one anymore that I read through it 4, 5, 6 times like I hear people say they do, because what I have found and what I've heard from other authors is you're going to change something regardless. You're going to think one thing's better and one thing's worse. And I'm very comfortable saying I'm a pulp fiction writer and I'm putting stuff out there fast. And and I have a fan base, but I know I'm doing well enough that people enjoy the stories and whatnot. So I am not going to worry about it has to be quote unquote perfect,
No, it's true. I think sometimes people, it's like, it's kind of like all or nothing, right? It's like either you're trying to write To Kill a Mockingbird or you don't care. And that's not true, right? There is a
Right.
difference. There is such a thing as entertainment that is interesting, creative, fun to read, accomplishes the goal, which is to take the audience on a fun adventure or whatever it is you're trying to do. In your
Right.
realm, it's probably an interesting puzzle they're trying to solve and all of that. But if you don't end up becoming the next great American novel, that's not exactly your goal, right? And you
Right.
might even, the truth of the matter is even in a process like yours, you can stumble into things like that because, sometimes trying to do that, you end up trying too hard anyway, right? There's
Right.
something to be said of quality, just it's fun to read kind of stuff, or, it's, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of going all over the
Yeah.
place, but
Well, and I met Dennis Lehane a few different times and talked to him, and even in his interviews, he'll talk about how he'll throw out, 2, 3, 400 pages while he's writing, and I read his stuff and go, he's a beautiful writer and whatever else, but he has the luxury to do that, is the way I look at it. He's got a big contract and he can take his time
yeah.
to write what he wants and tweak it and whatever else. I don't in some regards. I do
Yeah.
need to continue to have things out there and keep my readers engaged and that kind of thing. And, if I get to a point where I've got a big contract or whatever, great. But I still don't know that my process would change that much.
No, it's very true. And I mean, you can think of it too, like in the realm of television and all kinds of stuff. There are people that write stuff that's very intermittent. There's also people who write soap operas, right? And they write every day and people love their material. So it's like, it's just, there's different ways of using writing as an art form, right?
Right.
And they're all valid. And you can, as you've shown, you can certainly make a career out of the volume, and that's great. And I doubt your readers would want you to slow down, right? Because they probably have a voracious appetite. They're probably bothering you for the next work, right? So,
Right. Oh yeah, I get those emails. When's the next one?
exactly, right? So, obviously they're very happy with what you're doing. In terms of, I'm getting some more like logistical questions here, but I want to kind of pivot a bit to actually getting into mystery writing itself. Do you plan your books out? I'm guessing you probably do, considering how fast you work. So do you plan it out versus just kind of pantsing it and seeing what happens? Like, how is that sort of pre-writing conceptualizing the story before you start writing? How does that kind of work with your system?
Right. Yeah. I actually am a pantser.
Oh, wow. Okay. See,
Yeah.
there we go. I had no idea. I was like, how do you work so fast if you don't know what's happening? But there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it was very validating. A long time ago, I read a book by a mystery author about the craft, and she was the first one to say some people outline, some people pants, and either system is okay, because up to that point, all I'd read is you have to outline.
Yes.
And I was like, I can't
Mhm.
see the end of the story when I start. So I usually will come up with a kernel. Yeah, there you go. Pantsers Unite. I'll come up with the kernel of something, and like with the Reed series, it's easier because those are all part of the hook with him, is that he loves film noir and detective fiction, and so I always interweave a film noir movie into the plot somehow. And I pun a lot of the titles, and so I'll start with something with, okay, what could he be doing? A mystery that might tie into this particular movie type of thing. And, I'll start to figure out, okay, this can be the crux of the mystery, but I maybe don't know who's going to have done the killing or something like that, or it'll change as I go along. And early on, I really did kind of pants the whole way through and go, I'm not sure what's going to happen next or whatever. Now typically I can kind of go, okay, I kind of know what I want to do here. And so I know where about the first 8 or 10 chapters go. And then as I get to the end of that point, I'll start to go, okay, I need to have, you've got to have a certain amount of red herrings, and you've got to have the suspects and that kind of thing. And they need to be interviewed and that kind of stuff. and I'll start doing all of that. And then I reach a point about 2/3 of the way through where I can see to the end. Then at that point, and I go, okay, I know this has to happen, that has to happen. So I do kind of outline to the end. But I've had times where I'm like, I thought this person was going to be the killer, and I went, oh no, this would be a good twist to have it be that person. And that's where I think if you're an outliner, I think you have to be open to those kinds of the surprises coming in. And I think if you're a pantser, you have to realize that there is editing, because you'll be like on a change like that, you'll be like, okay, but now I need to go back through and change X, Y, or Z to make it all work.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That goes into one of the questions we got from Lisa. She asked it several times. She's very interested. How do you choose and write your red herrings? Which I'm sure that's kind of an abstract question, a little bit difficult to answer, but like what it's probably more of like, well, it just feels right, right? But like, is there anything more than just that, you know, any sort of thing you kind of look for?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it is, a lot of it is instinctual. Depending on the story and the characters, you know, you might look at a certain character and think, okay, well, he does, you know, he likes to go hiking or something like that. Well, gosh, I could put something in there that the killer could have done too, but so could this person here. And that'll make the reader wonder if that suspect A did it when it's really B, or something like that. And then I also just think, having read tons and tons of mysteries, you get ideas there, or think about things there. And I pay attention to stuff on TV too, and in terms of crime stuff or how they've solved things, you know, and listen to them saying things like, well, you know, the killer fooled them with this or that, or this is how they were tripped up, or those kinds of things as well. But you know, it's a little bit of a hard question to answer, because it can be so many different things.
Right. It's very work specific, I'm sure. How many times do you, I know this happens to a lot of writers, how many times do you watch something and you're inspired because you're like, I love it, but I want to do it this way? Like, you know, and you get that idea, but you're like, I'm going to go a completely different direction with it, that they kind of left money on the ground or something. Does that ever happen to you?
It has. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I know I've had times, where I've been like, you know, they took the story in this direction, but what about if you did it here? What about if you made that person the killer, or that kind of thing? I mean, there's, you know, you learn as you see and observe, whether you're realizing you're doing it or not, you know, and there's golden opportunities and all of that.
Sure. So we had questions about research. How much research do you have to do with police procedure, and how important is it to stay true to procedure? That's a good one. That's one of the kind of the barriers to entry, right? Because somebody's like, well, I have all these ideas, but I've never been a police officer, right? So like, how do I make sure that my work goes out there and people don't blast me with inaccuracy reviews and stuff like that, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, and they can. I think in the mystery genre, you do have to be very careful, because people will expect you to follow. Well, it's interesting. They expect you to follow what they think is right, which is a distinction, because I have had readers tell me, you're doing XYZ wrong. And I've actually talked to police who have said, no, they're learning that from TV, and TV is wrong.
Yeah, well, some can get repeated so much that people are like, oh, that's the way it is. And it's like, it's just a trope that keeps going over and over again. And so, and every time, you know, policemen get like, ugh, it's like, this is not how it's done. You know?
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, and I had a couple of cop friends and married couple, and he would watch the police shows, and the wife was like, she's like, I don't know how you can watch those. They're so wrong. And he goes, yeah, but it's funny to watch them and watch how wrong they are. Yeah. which I thought was funny, that his comment, but back to the question, you know, I had written a few Sarah Spillman short stories a long time ago. And I finally, early on, it was like, you want to have material out there. So I published the short stories, and I kept thinking I should turn these into a novel. Female protagonists are big and that kind of thing. And I was hesitant because I was like, I don't know anything about, police work. And I know a few cops, but they're busy and that kind of thing. And I'd been kind of mulling it over and going, I need to do something. I need to find a connection. And a fan actually reached out to me and said that she had, read all of my stuff, but her husband was a retired sheriff in North Carolina, and he would be happy to help if I ever wanted to talk to him. And I actually emailed them and didn't hear anything back for a while. And I was like, well, okay, I guess that was a dead end. And then she emailed and said, oh, they'd been in the Caymans visiting their son, but he's back and would talk to me. And so the first couple of books, I talked to Randy extensively and would go, okay, this is what I think is going to happen next. What would you do? And how would the police handle that? And we'd even have discussions at times where he'd be like, well, they do X, Y, and Z. And I said, okay, that makes sense, but this is fiction. That's very dry. That won't work. What if I did this? Does that make sense? And he'd go, yeah, that would be fine. And it was a big confidence builder for me, because by about the third book or so, I'd be like, okay, Randy, this is what I'm thinking I need to do. And this is what Sarah would do. Does that make sense? And he's like, yeah. He goes, yeah, you'd make a good cop. I was like, okay, cool. I've learned something. And I still consult with him every book, and I check things and try to make sure things are correct. And stuff is going to slip through, but the vast majority of your readers aren't going to notice. But I still think it behooves people to, if you can find a connection, because I've always heard this and it rings true. It seems true, but people like to talk. They like to talk about themselves. They like to share what they know.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And so if you can find that person that can be a resource, I would certainly do it. But I wouldn't let your fear of the unknown stop you.
No, and I tell the people that take courses with me too. It's like, for so many of these topics, a lot of times, the only time they answer questions about it is kind of their dry, normal, day job. And so when you give them interesting hypotheticals, it's like, well, what if they did this? And how long would this? And it's like, that's the sort of stuff that, if you're interested in that field, you kind of nerd out on anyway, right? And so a lot of times they're very happy to have those conversations with you. You may have to, you might have to ask a few people, but you can make that connection. And then as long as you don't, completely fire hydrant them, usually they're very happy to work with you for sure.
Right. And another suggestion, I would always offer to pay them. I have yet to have anybody take me up on that, because again, they're happy to help. And when you tell them you're going to put their name in the acknowledgments, they're thrilled to death to have their name in a book. But most people want to be helpful and will be helpful with you.
That's awesome. So, do you have a piece of advice for somebody who's maybe trying to specifically get into mysteries itself? Like, is there something that you've kind of figured out for yourself the hard way, perhaps, that you could help somebody avoid falling into that trap themselves, or something that, rings true for you after doing this for a while?
Well, I definitely think you need to know your genre or your subgenre. And that would be my big piece of advice. And for myself, just because I read so many mysteries, loved it since I was a kid, that piece was intuitive to me. But like when I started writing Nephilim, which is the horror-ish type of book, I went to the Horror Writers Association and I read almost every book that they had on their best of. Some of them, I don't know why they're there, but for me anyway. But
see, that's a confidence booster too, right? If you're like, people love this and I could do better than that.
Yeah. I was like, all right, that one just didn't hit it for me.
Yeah.
But I did a lot of reading in that, and a lot of exploring on the internet, how you write horror, what are the horror tropes and things like that, so that I knew of the genre and I knew of reader expectations. And I don't think you have to hit all of that, but if you're going to not hit a trope or not hit an idea, you need to have some kind of understanding of why you're not, or what is going to make your particular novel work. It's like rules are meant to be broken, but it's certainly better if you know why you're breaking it.
Right.
In writing, that's going to make your own novel better because you understand why I broke that rule, not just that I did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially
So,
with audience expectation, right? Because that's a lot of this.
yeah.
Why I think a lot of people who jump in don't get footing is because they're not really giving the audience what they're looking for, and they are
Right.
like having kind of a conversation with themselves, like, "Oh, it'd be so great if it was like this." It's like, yeah, but it's not like that normally because that's not exactly what people are looking for,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, I mean, I look back at early stuff that I've written and think, I wish I'd have done this differently, or why didn't I think of that? And I think if you're persistent and you're good, you're gonna be learning whether you realize it or not, and your own writing is gonna improve as you go along. Because I do think people, they tend to think, oh, I just wrote this brilliant book and put it out there and everybody read it, where most authors have stacks of stuff. I read Stephen King's On Writing, and he talked about how he had a railroad nail on his wall, and it was filled with rejection letters, that he would just take it and go, onto that nail, and most people are they're not an overnight success, even if it appears that way. They've had a lot of work in the background to get to where they were or are.
Exactly. So when you're talking about violating tropes, are there any kind of mystery cliches or tropes that you think are pretty done at this point? So you might recommend somebody look the other way rather than try to tackle it yet again because you're kind of sick of them?
Yeah. Well, the big one for me that always pops into my head is the alcoholic detective.
Yeah.
I just, it's like, oh my gosh, it just feels like it's been done to death. And I also go, I don't know if you've read Lawrence Block, but to me, he really took that idea and went with it and did it in a really good way. And it's hard to master. It's hard to up the master with that. But I see a lot of that. And even several years ago, some people that I was connecting with, and the one person I read their work and went, oh, here we go again, and it was like, it's not that it doesn't work and it creates conflict, but we've seen a lot of that. And to me, there's other ways to build that main character and to give them flaws than just, oh, they're an alcoholic. There are a lot of, I think, alcoholic detectives out there because you're dealing with death and crime and all of these negative things. But I think that there are other ways that you can have them flawed besides that. And the other one that drives me nuts, quite frankly, is an author doesn't know what to do with their character in terms of creating some more tension or whatever as they go through the series. So they make them break up with the boyfriend or girlfriend or the husband or wife, and somebody had asked, my editor would ask me about that with Reed and his significant other. And as you read through the series, they get married. And I said, the one thing I refuse to do is have them get divorced because I just think it's a cop out for me.
Yeah. Well, it's easy, right?
Yeah.
It's easy, right? Well, it's one reason why, like, it's so rare you see stories that have like people together, right? It's either all the adventure of will they, won't they, and they like never want to solve that, or like you said, it's they're split up and it's all that. Like when you put them together, it's like that's off the table. It's like, well, now you got to work because like what's gonna make intrigue in their lives,
Right.
And to some degree, robbing yourself of that, like you said, a cop out, means you have to dig deeper, get a little more interesting, try some different sort of methods of conflict. So I'm with you on both of those. I agree. I think there are more interesting conflicts to be had in the genre for sure. Another question I have in terms of writing, and this also would appeal to a lot of newer authors, because it seems like one of the things that really benefits authors, particularly in the self-publishing world, are series, because you can get people interested in the character and then you can have them follow that character, right? And so you don't have to re-advertise in the same way every single time, and you can build up a library so that if you get them in on one, it's like, well, they'll follow the funnel, through a lot of different ones and things like that. So what are some of the considerations you have to do, in terms of planning out a series that you think you have to keep in the mind, the back of your head? You said you're not going to break them up, right? But
Yeah.
do you try to like figure out some sort of overall development for the character or things like that, or how does it generally work out with you?
I do think you have to think through some of where they're going or what's going to happen. And I will admit to not doing a very good job of that probably with the Reed Ferguson series, because I was learning, and I was more focused on the mystery. And that's one of the things as I go back and go, I wished I had done a little better with his character development. Now, having said that, I have a fan base. I have people that like him and it grows. So it's not like it was done so poorly that, that nobody wants to read the books. But I'm definitely more cognizant of that now with the new stuff that I write. And I'm trying to be aware of ways to go, okay, I've got these characters together, or, in a couple of the series, they're boyfriend, girlfriend, and then they're moving on to getting married. But I'm trying to be very cognizant of there's got to be other interruptions in their life or things that happen that they have to solve, as well as the mystery, to sort of keep both those lines going. And I don't always know what that's going to be. And I'll bat ideas around with friends, but I'm very aware now of going, they can't just kind of just go through their life and everything is the mystery that they're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's true. It kind of makes them flat, right? It gets very episodic when you do that. Although, to your point, it's like people are finding successful. You can certainly point to like TV dramas, right? Like it's like Murder, She Wrote and Matlock and all those things. It's like characters really don't change very much, It's more about the puzzles. So I feel like the mystery genre is a little more forgiving than some others on that. So it kind of helps the authors out a little bit.
It definitely does. Yeah, it definitely does. And it's just that I think if you can be aware of, I need to try to flesh out my characters when you start the first book, you're definitely better off. But it's funny because even, the Reed series, I think there's 22 books and a couple of novellas and 5 short stories. There's a lot of material there. And my editor, who has edited the entire series, was commenting on some of the side characters. And at one point, I think it even said, have you considered just taking them out? And I said, I can't, because now the readers expect them there. This is a family for them.
Yeah.
And so I can do things to shake up the story, shake up their characters, but I would be vilified if I got rid of them. And you have to keep that in mind, because there's an author, her name was Karen Kievsky, and spoiler alert for people, but it's been a long time since I read the series, but towards the end, she killed off the boyfriend. And one of the rumors was that her agent had heard fans, they were not happy with that. And it kind of killed the series for her. Mm. So you have to be aware, if you're going to do something drastic like that, in my opinion, you better know what you're doing, and you better know what your readers want, because they might not like that.
Yeah, that is one of the dangers with the series, right? Is that you get more and more emotional involvement. If you get multiple volumes into a series, it's like, at this point you have a relationship. And so where you go with them, you'll have them calling you out. It's like, that's out of character. It's like, they'll start to know the people better than you, because they've really invested into it,
Yeah, no, it's very true. Very true.
That's awesome. So in terms of, I'm trying to look at some of the comments here. Getting back to some of the logistics, for cover work, do you basically just, I'm assuming you don't design your own covers, you hire people for that, right?
Correct. Early on, I had a guy who designed a couple of covers for the Reed series, and I was mimicking his style for a while, and I reached a point where I was like, I'm not doing good covers, and it's hurting my work. And it took me a while, financially, and it was just a big commitment to look at how am I going to do 16 or 17 covers. But I finally reached out to a guy, and you got to shop around. You got to find somebody that seems like they're hitting what you want. But I redid that series of covers, and you could see the sales going up. And it's not an easy thing, because the other thing is, I would say, if you're get some opinions of other people and people that understand the genre, and study what Amazon is doing in terms of who the best sellers are, because what you think might be a great cover isn't what's going to speak to everybody else in the genre. So I get a lot of help there, because I don't necessarily have a good eye in terms of, matching it to what's going on out there. And
I mean, and that's a good point, right? Because it really is that, they call it mating plumage, right? It really is that, you don't, it's almost the opposite of what you might expect, but often you don't really want to stand out much, right? Because what it sort of does is it shows you, how the game is played, you kind of fit in with the genre, you have those signpost, image markers. That is what the audience looks for. And so, yeah, it's important to know that, because and it's good that you operated like that. You can see the difference, because we all know there are authors that are like, well, I could do it totally myself, and it's like, they might make beautiful covers, but they're often not really correct, because that's just not the world they live in. And so it's helpful to know your limitations. Here we have a comment. What I like about the Reed books is they remind me of Spencer books, yet Reed seems more human. He's not a superhero. He has fear and doesn't have superhuman strength. There you go.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I like Spencer. I do like Spencer, but yeah, sometimes you're like, okay, come on, dude,
It's like, again, it's sort of like a genre thing, right? It's like, do you want the person to be kind of James Bondish, and it's like they can get out of anything, or do you want it to feel a little grittier, a little more grounded, whatever you want to say?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I have taken a hit or two from readers who think that Reed is too vulnerable, like, well, he got beat up again or whatever. But to me, it was more realistic, whereas, like, well, what did you think was going to happen? But that's what you
so
can't,
again, yeah, it's like
everybody.
maybe those readers were looking more for the fantasy, right? It's like the tough guy that can always take on the people and everything. Do you ever get inspired by real crime? I'm assuming.
Oh
yes.
yeah.
How could you not, right?
Yeah. No, although there's that serial killer who just got caught in New York and in Long Island, and I've been paying attention or listening to that, or the guy in Idaho, the same thing. That one in particular, it was like, I thought that was fascinating, because they just all along thought that the police didn't know what they were doing, and they were bumbling through it. And you come to find out 2 months later that, man, they had that guy in their sights early on, but they also knew they had to get him in a certain way and make sure that they could build the case against him and that kind of thing. And yeah, I was watching those very carefully. But yeah, I mean, you get ideas. I've heard other mystery authors talk about that. I've heard other mystery authors say, John Sanford is one where his early books, people were like, they're too graphic. And he was a crime writer, and he was like, I actually toned it down from this
right
that I was seeing and hearing, but I had to tone it down more because people didn't want that much detail. But yeah, there's always stuff out there that I think that can inspire a story or a part of a plot or something.
Sure. Do you have intensive weapons study? Like, I'm assuming you have looked a lot into weapons and whatnot. You have to brainstorm, right?
I didn't initially, but when I started with Gunning for Trouble, I got connected with a guy who was a detective here, but he was also ex special ops and that kind of thing. And then I have another friend of a friend who we have talked weapons extensively, because for that series, she deals much more with various types of guns and whatnot. And I was like, I want to make sure that I'm accurate with this stuff. So yeah, I've been getting my training there.
Do you use a lot of social media in your marketing, or do you have somebody do that for you?
No,
you're talking about not liking that, so I was like, maybe there's somebody who is you.
Yeah. I admit to not being as good with it as I should. I have a Facebook page which hooks up to my Instagram. I started TikTok, but it's time consuming, and truthfully, I don't like being on camera, and I think
Oh, I'm
that's
sorry.
yeah, I know,
You're
yeah.
like, hi.
Yeah, but I honestly, I need to get over it, and I think other people do too, because readers want to connect with you, in other ways than just through your books. And even if it's small, simple things, they want to hear from you and whatnot. So I
Right.
I try to be on social media. But a piece of advice too is don't people get, especially early on, they got caught up and you got to be in everything. I got to have a Facebook page, then I got to do Twitter, and I need to do then Instagram, and then it was Pinterest, and just all these things. And it's
Get
like,
tied up.
you're better off to just do one or two of them halfway decently or well than to spread yourself thin trying to hit everything that's out there.
Sure. Do you read reviews? I love that question, because I know some authors that literally don't. They have somebody else do it, and they're like, only send me the good stuff, or if you think there's something I need to worry about, I'm not reading anything.
I used to, and early on, you want to see what people think. And I think there's a good and bad. I do think sometimes it's good to read your bad reviews because they will point out things that you missed. But it can also be, you really do have to have a thick skin if you're going to read your own reviews. So what I've heard other people do, and I have done it over time, and actually even now, but I will go to other books in the genre and read their 1-star reviews and see what the negatives they're saying about that book.
Especially books you really like, right?
Yeah.
You like read the 1-star review of like Pride and Prejudice or something, like some classic, and you're like, okay, people can hate anything,
Yeah. I've only ever, there was one review that I reported back to Amazon because it was awful, and they like called me, something about an American with a KKK author and references to the Bible and weird things, and I was like, come on, and but a word of warning, because I think people do want to go, well, I should report it to Amazon or and it's like, you're better to just let it go. Just, they disagree with you. They didn't see it the way you did or whatever. And it's just fine, because if you're writing a good book, you will connect with an audience of people who do like what you do. And you're never going to please all of the people all of the time. No.
So we have some fans here who are happy that you are stepping out of your comfort zone and appearing on us. That's awesome.
No problem.
What was your old day job, by the way, if you don't mind saying? You don't have to if you want to keep.
No, that's fine. Well, I started out as a counselor a long time ago, and I was a drug and alcohol counselor, and I worked with sexually abused teens. And then I got out of that and got into IT, and I was a data analyst, and then went on into being like a business analyst at my last job. And I like this a lot better.
I would imagine so. But I would imagine that other, when you're talking about counseling, you're talking about empathy and all of that. So I'm sure that does help you with your writing in terms of some of your instincts, right? In terms of how people would react to different things and troubled situations and things like that. That could certainly come into play, so that does actually make sense. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. Do you want to give a shout out to where people can find you online? I believe it's just your name, ReneePawlish.com, right?
Right. Yep. And I'm on Amazon right now. Talking about going wide versus being on Amazon is a whole nother discussion. But
right. Get into the nitty gritty talk shop. Right. You're primarily on Amazon. Awesome. And here's some of the works you have. Quite a few different series out there. Some different subgenres, right, within the mystery that you cover.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Try to touch different bases.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to pivot here to what's going on within the autocrit world. So I have the fantasy / sci-fi club coming on this evening, which is going to be 7 p.m. And we're going to do live readings of your work and give you some live feedback. So join us for that. Tomorrow in the horror club, I have Gareth. I don't know if you're there. Are you there, Gareth?
I'm here. Hello.
What are we doing in the Horror Club tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern?
Tomorrow we're doing a style dissection of Christy Nogle's book, Beulah, which is
Nice.
an award-winning book from last year, and we're going to look at what's going on under the surface.
It sounds totally up my alley. It's not. That's why we have it. Would I actually make it through it without passing out? I guess that's the question you can answer.
I think you would.
Oh, okay. All right. The other thing I'd like to talk about is our Mystery Mind course, which is going to be starting next Monday, July 31st. You can sign up here below. That is going to be hosted by me. We're going to go through the elements of writing a mystery. We're going to talk about some of the things we talked about today, you know, how to avoid some of those tropes. You might be thinking, well, I don't want to have an alcoholic detective because Renee just told me not to, and I'll tell you not to too. And what can I do? We'll talk about some of the ways you can make a flawed protagonist, ways to create a list of suspects, ways to make an interesting crime, etc., etc. All going to be covered in our mystery writing course, again, starting next week. And for our AutoCrit Pro members, we're also going to be starting a mystery club. And I can tell you, we're in the works to bring on some other authors, just like we had Renee, and hopefully some of them are going to join us over the next few weeks in the mystery club as well. So just stay tuned for that. Very exciting. The Accountability Club is going to be next Monday at 11 a.m. We do them every week. But before I wrap up, I just want to make sure, just in case anybody had any questions about the submission or anything like that involving our challenge here. So if you do, please go ahead and throw it there in the chat. Once again, if you're in the writing desk, which is where you would have built your file, and if not, you can always import it into the writing desk. You will see in the save area for the writing desk, which is right over my head, you're going to go hit save. You're going to go to submissions. Let me duck out of the way. And then you'll get to mystery challenge right here. And that is where you submit. You have 1 day, 9 hours, 55 minutes, and so odd seconds. All right. And what is in this white space is what we're going to be looking at. If you use the inspiration builder, if you use the story builder, if you use the inspiration studio, fair enough, but we're not going to be looking at that material. We're just looking at what's in that white space there. All right. Let's see here. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. And I'm glad, Stephen, I'm glad a fan got to interact with the author. That's always fun. We like bringing people together. Yes, it was it was a wonderful interview. Thanks again to Renee. And yeah, we will see you around AutoCrit. Friday, 1 p.m. is going to be the announcement of the finalists, and then join us, and then you can vote on the ultimate winner. So thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Take care.
See you around.